Triangulation pressure starts when an unnamed third person is used as proof that your decision, memory, or boundary is unreasonable. The practical test is whether the concern can survive a direct conversation with the actual person being quoted. Someone says everyone agrees with them, or claims a friend is worried about you, while refusing to name the person, quote the concern, or let you verify it directly. The first distinction around the third-person claim is consent, because information may be offered while ownership of the next choice must remain visible. The pattern here is borrowed social proof used to create a crowd you cannot question. Psychologically, fear of group rejection can make an unsupported claim feel urgent before the listener has checked whether the group or concern is real, which lets emotional pressure arrive before anyone has examined the unnamed claim. Maybe they say your friends all think you are selfish, but no friend has spoken to you and every request for a name changes the subject. That first example matters because the unnamed claim sounds ordinary, while the hidden cost appears only after resistance. Maybe a colleague is said to have complained, yet a direct meeting is discouraged because the unnamed opinion works better as pressure than as evidence. The second example shows why repetition around that borrowed opinion matters, because a fair misunderstanding becomes clearer while pressure keeps protecting the same outcome. Map the direct source test in order. An unnamed third person's opinion becomes pressure when direct verification is discouraged. The sequence behind the direct source test is more reliable than a guess about motive. The next useful distinction for the invisible crowd is this. An absent third person makes a claim hard to verify and easy to exaggerate because the source cannot clarify the words or context. That distinction keeps the invisible crowd tied to observable behavior. A practical response starts here. If that person has a concern, I am willing to discuss it with them directly. I will not answer an unnamed group claim. Say it once and watch whether the quoted concern becomes clearer or simply finds another route back to the demanded outcome. The evidence test for the third-person claim is whether questions produce a named source, exact wording, relevant context, and a direct or formal way to respond instead of more guilt or urgency. One tense exchange around the unnamed claim proves very little. Concern rises when the unnamed claim forms a repeatable structure where a reasonable alternative keeps disappearing. Slow that borrowed opinion down by writing the request, the offered options, the missing option, and the consequence attached to disagreement. A healthy misunderstanding about the direct source test usually creates room for correction. Pressure often makes that clarity inconvenient. Use this reality check for the invisible crowd. Comparison, unnamed authority, and relayed messages all create pressure when the person being quoted cannot speak for themselves. Exact wording around the invisible crowd exposes what an emotional summary may hide. The aftermath of the conversation matters too. Ask whether the interaction gave you usable information or merely made you more afraid to verify the source. Ask a direct question, pause, or keep a reasonable boundary. Do not overstate what the third-person claim proves. An imperfect exchange involving the third-person claim can still improve without becoming a control pattern. The threshold is crossed when the unnamed claim repeatedly makes autonomy, verification, or another reasonable option feel disloyal. A small experiment can clarify that borrowed opinion. Pause before responding to that borrowed opinion, request one concrete fact, or state one narrow limit, then observe the response. If the conversation is repairable, the response can tolerate specifics and a slower decision without erasing the direct source test. When pressure protects the direct source test, the delay often becomes the new offense. Keep safety ahead of proving anything about the invisible crowd. For a risky test of the invisible crowd, use written communication, distance, trusted support, or qualified help. A boundary around the quoted concern is not a diagnosis. It is your decision about what evidence and process you require before responding to the quoted concern. Remember this protection rule. Do not defend yourself against a crowd that cannot be identified, quoted, or asked a direct question. End with agency. A healthy concern can survive direct verification instead of depending on an unnamed third person's opinion. A viewer learning about the third-person claim should leave with a clearer next choice, not a scarier label. An invisible crowd is powerful because nobody in it can answer a direct question. Everyone agrees is not evidence until the people, words, and context can be identified. Triangulation keeps the speaker in control of every version passed between two people. Direct contact removes the advantage of translating one person's concern for another. Ask who raised the concern, what they observed, and what outcome they actually requested. A legitimate complaint usually becomes more specific when the source is included. Borrowed social proof becomes suspicious when verification is called rude or unnecessary. Do not confess to a group judgment before confirming that a group judgment exists. At work, request a meeting or written example instead of arguing with an unnamed colleague. In relationships, refuse comparisons that make a third person the standard for your boundary. A direct conversation may still be uncomfortable, but it replaces the imagined crowd with checkable facts. Triangulation loses force when every person is allowed to speak for themselves. Refuse to compare yourself with a third person whose actual view remains unknown. Ask whether the quoted person authorized their words to be used in this argument. Notice when the supposed concern changes each time you request a direct source. A named example is easier to evaluate than a vague claim about what people think. Do not let majority language replace the specific behavior under discussion. If confidentiality is legitimate, request the observable concern without invented consensus. A mediator can help when direct contact is unsafe or structurally inappropriate. The goal is verification and fair process, not forcing disclosure that could create harm. Social proof should become evidence only after its source and relevance are clear. Your response can wait until the invisible crowd becomes a checkable concern. Direct evidence can be questioned. Direct wording can be clarified. Direct sources can correct a translation. Direct conversation removes invented consensus. Direct process protects every person's voice. First, separate a relayed concern from a verified concern. The messenger may be accurate, mistaken, selective, or protecting confidentiality. Until the source and observable behavior are clear, the claim is information to check rather than a verdict you must obey. At work, confidentiality may prevent a manager from naming a colleague. That does not require you to answer an imaginary majority. Ask for the exact behavior, date, impact, and standard that applies. A fair process can protect a source while still giving you something concrete to address. In a relationship, comparison often replaces a direct request. Someone says their ex never needed privacy, or a friend thinks your boundary is strange. Bring the conversation back to the two people present. What are you asking, and why should that request be reasonable here? Family systems can pass messages through the safest person instead of letting two people speak directly. You can decline the messenger role. Say that you care about both people, but you will not carry accusations, negotiate private boundaries, or translate a concern that the original person can raise safely themselves. Direct contact is not always safe or appropriate. A mediator, manager, counselor, or written process may be better when there is retaliation risk or a power imbalance. The principle is not forced confrontation. It is reducing distortion while protecting everyone involved. Pay attention when the alleged consensus grows each time you ask a question. One friend becomes several people, then everyone has apparently noticed. Expanding majority language without new names or examples is a reason to slow down, not a reason to confess faster. A clean boundary can be short. I will respond to a specific concern from the person involved or through an appropriate formal process. I will not make a decision because an unnamed group is said to agree. That keeps the door open to evidence while closing the pressure route. Sometimes direct verification shows that the third person did raise a real concern. That does not make the earlier pressure method healthy, but it gives you facts you can address. Own what is yours, correct what is inaccurate, and keep the process focused on behavior rather than group shame. Other times, the source gives a different story or says their words were exaggerated. Resist the temptation to turn that discovery into another triangle. Speak to the original messenger about the mismatch, document important details, and decide what trust or communication boundary now makes sense. The goal is not to distrust every secondhand message. Communities need warnings, witnesses, and confidential reporting. The goal is a proportionate process where claims become specific enough to evaluate and no invisible crowd is allowed to replace your right to ask a fair question. Direct verification turns pressure back into information. If this helped, save it and subscribe for sharper psychology patterns without the noise.